All right, folks, I'm recording now.
Anyway,
Thanks, interesting.
Nicole, did you get to meet Justine?
I did.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And Aaron, met Justine?
yeah, briefly.
Okay.
Good meeting you. Well, again, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
We appreciate your service that you've already given with the school board and that you're running again. Could, just to start, maybe give us a little bit about what was the motivation, having served on the school board, to now run for House District?
Yeah, so for me, it all boils back to learning. I have two kids that struggle with their education, and that's how I got involved. That's how I started getting on the school board. Was I realized that I had a skill for advocacy for students, and it started with advocating for my own children. And then it evolved into, while I was advocating for my kids, I realized that there were other kids that that needed the special circumstances for their education. So there was other kids that their parents weren't advocating for them. And so I sort of started advocating for a couple more kids because I was seeing them fall behind as well, and then maybe a couple more kids. And then seat opened up on the school board when Judge Wells Ashby became judge, and then I was appointed to that position. And so that's a little bit of the history of how I got involved, but it's been really important for me as a school board member to advocate for a lot of the kids that get left behind because they don't learn. And so when we talk about graduation rates, if you boil it down, the kids that aren't graduating are the ones that have difficulty in fitting into the system. And so maybe it's because they have a language barrier, they can maybe speak a different language at home, maybe their needs aren't being met because they have special learning disabilities. And so that's been something that I really championed on the school board. And as we find funding that gets tighter and tighter, and we have to cut or not add back positions, we still have 13% less teachers in our classrooms in the Bell Pine School District than we did before the recession. We have never recovered from the recession. There are not many sectors of our community that can say they have not recovered from the recession. Most businesses have recovered. Our economic forecasts are larger than they've ever been in our state, and we still have not replaced those teachers. And so it's been a mission of mine to make sure we don't accept what we have now as status quo. Because what happens when we do that is the kids that really suffer are the ones that need a more personalized education.
Sure.
And so
why do you think it is that the schools haven't recovered?
Well, I think...
Since you're moving into the legislature.
I think there's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of policy choices that are not, frankly, the best policy choices, that put school districts in, makes their priorities different than what their vision is. And so we have to kind of we have to react to those things, and so policy decisions can hurt the school districts, as well as funding has been a really big issue. And we have the QEM report, and we're lucky to have a QEM. I don't know if I call you a QEM board member or...
I am a commissioner.
QEM commissioner at the table.
Commission, yeah, it's a commission. What am I?
Thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
And so the QEM has reported that we've been underfunded for many, many years, and they also not only report where we're underfunded, they report on where we're failing. And so there's been this report done for 19 years now.
Close, yeah, something like that.
Okay, and 19 years we've been writing this report, and we have literally, as a state, done nothing with it. We file the report, we put it in a corner, and we don't choose to take on some of the things that are recommended in it. As far as policies, we don't fully fund the system as it's recommended, and so right now, to fully fund the system, the QEM is recommending a $10.4 billion investment in education. And being on the school board, we've seen very little investment. And what we've had to do is we've had to cut as far away from the classrooms as possible, because education, our mission is to educate students, and we've got to protect our classrooms as much as we can. So what that means is we've had to cut a lot of mental health and wraparound services, and you can see what that means to our community, and it's something that's really, really hard. And so we've actually, in our last budget, we've added back some positions and taken them away from the classrooms because it's so hard. And so this is a problem that I've seen firsthand, and I know what we need to do, and we need to fund education, we need to fund it fully, and we need to make sure we're funding options for our kids because that matters to them to stay in school, and we need to make sure we're taking care of our special needs kids that have different needs than everyone else. And so I want to go to the legislature and really change that dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that obviously people point to is PERS. And how do you get 10.4 billion out of the state at this time? And I think that perhaps leads into those questions.
Yeah, so we have higher revenues than we've ever had before, and I think as a legislator, if I'm so honored to be the one that is elected, I would champion education, and I think you have to lead with a vision. And we've seen our school board be able to lead with a vision, and when we've led with a vision, what that means is that we don't veer away from our vision. We cut as far away as we can. And so I think that if we walk into the legislature and we say, we're funding the QEM, we're funding it first, and we'll figure this out, then we'll figure it out.
So the QEM, you feel like, will be your guiding light as you move into the legislature, like that's what you want to pull the legislative attention?
Yeah, I think also we have the Joint Chiefs of Staff that are circling the state right now and looking into education in every single area, and I'm really excited to see what they come back with on their reports. I think it's also important that we work with school boards, the Oregon School Boards Association. I think it's important that we work with COSA, our Superintendents Association, and I think we need to come together as a community and that wants better education and figure out what are the biggest things we can move the needle and how far can we go. And also Stand for Children, which has been a huge mover and shaker in our state on how to move forward some money into the classrooms, and they did that with Measure 98, which I championed along with them, and did some testifying and trying to get that implemented, and we got it implemented at 50%. But what that means is that we had more money to invest in 9th grade on track programs in Belmapine schools. We had more money to invest in career and technical education as well as AP programs. And so when you have those options, you see the needle move and we can move graduation rates. And so I think targeted investments are really important to make sure that we move what we want to accomplish, because we can't just blanketly invest without making sure the policies and the vision and the outcomes that we need are really driven. And so I think that's really important, that we make sure that we just don't say we can throw money at this problem and fix it, because there are some, real vision and driving towards a solution that needs to happen to make sure we have a cohesive system across our state.
One of the things that I hear from people who are campaigning is that we have higher revenues, but don't you also have a higher base of people that need services? We have a higher population than we've ever had as well. How do you?
So managing growth has been something that's been a real issue in Bend,
Right.
and on the school board it's no different. I mean, we're the 4th largest growing city in the United States. That's a real number. And so when we have growth, sorry.
It's okay.
You do really have to manage growth. And so we've been lucky when we go to the voters and we ask for help to manage that growth. Our voters have supported it, and that's been a tremendous asset. Also, from a state level, when you have students, you get more money. And so when you have a critical mass in a certain size of district, it allows you to have a little bit more options and programs that you could provide if you didn't. So the real problem in education is if you're one of the districts that is shrinking because their students are moving to our area. Mm-hmm. So the growth has actually, I believe, helped us. And don't get me wrong, it has been a really difficult thing to manage. And when you're getting 500 new students a year, that's been a lot. This year we only got around 140, so we felt a little bit of a reprieve and a breather. But the growth has actually helped us as far as being able to fund our schools. And then the voters have passed our bonds and been able to help us manage the growth with the building. And so I am currently in the process of overseeing the 4th school being built. So I've built I've built 1 elementary school, 1 middle school, on the board overseeing those, the construction of those, and then now we're in the process of building another elementary school and a high school, which I'm actually on the design team for the high school, and there is nothing more fun than that, because you just get to dream and imagine the possibilities. And when we're doing this, we're designing this building for 100 years, and so it's an honor and a challenge, because what does education look like in 100 years when it's changing so much? And so we've been designing these career and technical education programs to make sure that we can flex and move with the future. And so we've put like 3 classrooms together so that they can be able to be worked into something different if they need to be, because I don't know what career and technical education looks like in 100 years. And so
This is actually a question I've been wanting to ask a board member. Is the new high school going to have alternative means of transportation to get to it? Is that being part of, the plan, so that students can ride their bikes to school? I know the location, it's very car-heavy location. I was curious about that.
so we did design some really cool things. There's next to it, Parks and Recs is building a park.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a path that goes around the entire school, like a walking bike path type thing. And so I would hope that kids use it for those types of purposes.
But I guess, is there any sort of collaboration with the city and what their expansion plans are in order to really, jive with their plan to get people out of their cars? Are we thinking about that in terms of how our students get to school?
Yeah, so there's neighborhoods that will be going around it, so that will help. All of our schools that we've built, we try and build them in neighborhoods so that there's walkability to that, to the schools. And I think that's really an important thing, and you see that in communities really buy into their schools, like Pine Ridge is a great example, Elk Meadow. Most of our schools are located in a neighborhood, and the high school is a harder one to locate in a neighborhood now, because you have to have 50 acres to be able to build all the fields. And we just had enough by twisting and turning those fields around, and that was a fun planning game. Yeah. And so, I think that that will evolve. But we work very closely with the city on this project and the Parks Department, because the park is right next to the schools, and so there's a path that goes through there, and there's talk about how do we get the kids that are going to be able to walk on that path and those types of things. So there is collaboration around that.
Cool. I think we were getting to the revenue question, which is the larger question of...
Okay, it goes back to that higher revenue versus higher, number of people to service. And then if you, in the other race, Jack is fond of saying, we've never had more revenue, and I won't raise your taxes. But the revenue is tax base that's coming in, and it's based on the number of people that have moved here. We have more people in Oregon than we've ever had before, more humans that need these services, which the taxes are providing for. So, and it comes back to PERS. If you have a retirement system and a growing need for people within the school district, what is your position on revenue versus expense cutting? Can you cut? Do you feel, as a legislator, you can cut your way to a solution?
For funding the QEM, and also talking about PERS as well.
Well, mostly because PERS is the biggest unfunded mandate going forward. It's the fiscal cliff. So how do you respond to that? Did I throw too much in there?
No, you're just going to have to be patient while I answer.
You're the only one in the room, so take your time.
So PERS is a real issue. I mean, we have people that are counting on it for their retirement. We have to make it sustainable. It's 69% funded right now, which means that the system can now double collar the school district. So they could double the amount of PERS that we have to pay. In Benton Pine Schools, next biennium, we already know that we have to pay $10 million more, and that's before we figure out where the system is actually at today. That is a real number, and it's a real problem, and it is part of the reason that we can't invest back into our classrooms and why we have 13% less teachers. So there's real math there, and it's unfortunate math. I think it's very important that we make sure we have a sustainable system. People are counting on the system, and we can't have a system that is 69% funded. It is not stable, and so we have to do some reforms to make sure that it is stable. And I sat on the PERS Legislative Advisory Committee, I believe that's what it's called, for 4 years. And many times during that committee, you get all everybody's magic bullet solution, right? You get like these big booklets, and you read through them, and there was lots of solutions that were $200 million. And during the time on that committee, people said, oh, that's just $200 million, it's not enough. We need $1 billion. Well, in my perspective as a business owner, if you can get 5 of those $200 million, you got $1 billion. And maybe it would be less taxing to the system to stabilize it in smaller bites versus trying to take the whole giant apple and reform it at the same time. And so I think we really need to look at smaller options, and the Morrow decision was very clear. They were clear that we can make changes moving forward. I believe that we need to have the courage to make some changes. 1, to be able to fund our classrooms, and 2, to make sure that our retirees that are having to count on the system can count on the system. I think it's really important that we do the right thing for everyone, and it's not going to be popular, but I have the courage to go and make sure that we do the right thing by the system for all of the people, and so I think it's really important that we do that. And
does that mean that you would be in favor of some kind of revenue raising initiative?
Well, I think that you have to make sure we have a $26 billion unfunded actuarial liability at this point, and so we have to make sure that we are not just dumping money into this huge debt. We've got to figure that out, and then we can figure out, once we figure out how we can manage the debt that we have and shore up the system and make it sustainable, then I think we have to look at the revenue that's come in. We have to look at our priorities, and I'm a business person. I have to make things work within my budget. I provide 401k for my staff and health insurance. There is not another restaurant that I know of that does that. I do that by working inside of my budgets and having a vision, because I want to provide benefits for my coworkers, and I will do that. And so I think being a business person, I have a different look on the budgets, and I'd really like to get into seeing how we can work with what we have. I think it's important that we do that first, and that would be my first step. And I don't want to get too many steps ahead of myself, because I think that is my first priority.
As a business owner, if you are in a time where you are growing, yes, you would work at eliminating waste within your business, but you're also going to be looking at new sources of revenue. I mean, in the restaurant industry, you would be looking for possibly open a second restaurant, or open, looking at something new that you would offer. Maybe you're going to extend your hours, maybe you're going to those would be revenue generating ideas. And I do understand the need to, you have an unfunded mandate within your business, you're certainly going to strap down. But at the same time, if I knew I had a hole that was going to wreck my business, I'd be looking at, 24-hour operation if that was what it was going to be required.
So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on this, because we have, in our business, we have added healthcare, we've added sick days, we've increased minimum wage, we've added 401k. those are a lot of ads to a business, right? We don't always raise our prices. Our prices are pretty fair, and it's something that we don't always just go to the menu and say, this has to cost you more. We look inside of our system, and it is very much what we do. We try and make sure that we're using everything efficiently. You know, when you're cutting the red peppers, I'm going to tell you, make sure you use the tops. Don't throw those out, because if you throw out a quarter of a cup of red peppers every day for 363 days that we're open, that adds up to real money. If you don't squeeze the lemons all the way and you only squeeze them half and you throw them out, that's $80 a case. And every week there's probably another case that I have to add on, and that adds up by 363 days. When you're serving jambalaya and you don't take out and use your spatula to scrape out the rest of the jambalaya into the plate, that costs me money. That's real money. And those are the type of things that we do to make sure that we can be affordable to everybody, because I don't want to price our restaurant out where we're only serving a certain clientele. And so that is something that I struggle with on a daily basis as a restaurateur, that keeps getting more added onto our plate to make sure that we can provide, you know, I gotta make sure that over 90 people can pay their rent and their mortgages and take care of their families, and it's a responsibility that I take on very heavy. And if I move up those menu prices too much, I price people out.
Right.
And I wanna make sure that we're not pricing people out of Oregon too.
That's fair.
So I'm curious why, you know, if you've been on the PERS committee in the past, was that something that you advocated for in that role, and why has that not been part of the process thus far, or has it? In misinterpreting what you're saying.
What part?
Well, the assessing the budget. It sounds like you're saying let's look at the entire, you know, pot and see where we're spending the money.
That's not the charge of the PERS legislative advice. So the PERS Legislative Advisory Committee is a committee underneath the PERS board that just brings recommendations that they believe should be moved forward to the PERS board to be moved forward to the legislature. Am I correct in that, Judy?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So there's no, I mean, that's...
So looking at saying, hey, board, we think you should assess the budget, look for all the places you can, you know, cut the red peppers better, that's not part of it?
No.
Okay.
No, that's
so
not
how do you
part of
think
the
as a
charge.
new legislator you would make that actually happen?
I think you go there and you make that happen.
Mhm.
I mean, if you want to accomplish something, you have to have a vision and you have to stick to it and you have to accomplish it. And that's my goal.
Okay.
Sort of dovetailing on that, Sherry, you're gonna go, you know, assuming that you win this position.
Nothing's given.
Nothing's given, that's right. Knock on wood, don't jinx, right,
Right.
got it. But say you win the position.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go in what will likely be a minority position, i.e. that it appears, and again, it's best guessulating, I guess you would say. There will be a difference in votes between the two parties. I don't think necessarily there's going to be a supermajority. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's not going to be a supermajority.
Oh my gosh,
With
you're
the
just all over the
Democrats.
place with this.
Well,
That's what we do.
yeah.
You don't have to do it, but we have to do that.
We have, anyway, but you're still gonna likely be in the minority caucus. And so in that position, as people are, I think, in the majority, but I think more so, there is oftentimes a lot of pressure to just go along the line, to basically toe the line that the leadership for the party tells you within the caucus. How, if you are posed with, you know, some propositions, some issues that you don't necessarily agree with the position of the leadership in the caucus, how are you going to approach that? The pressure's going to be huge on you just to toe the line.
Well,
How are you going to approach that?
I need to get you a campaign flyer first off, because I do not toe party lines. I just don't. I'm not a politically partisan person. I never have been. If you look at my platform, I am pro-choice, I'm pro-LGBTQ, I am pro-gun reform. I am not a party line person. I'm not a politically aligned person. I'm very independent-minded. I always have been, I always will be, and that's something that I pride myself on. And I'm very clear that those are the things that I value, and I believe that the Republican Party is obviously has chose me as their nominee, and I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that the Republican Party is endorsing someone who is independent-minded and doesn't line up with all of their beliefs. And I believe going into a minority, I wouldn't have run for this position if I didn't think I could work with the other side. And going in as a minority party, I think that I will be working with these social issues across the line naturally, because there are where I'm going to vote. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to create relationships, and I think I match the view of most of the voters, because we are very socially moderate in Bend, and I think that's a really important thing, and I want to make sure that I'm building those relationships on the things that I believe in and that I will vote for. I'm going to vote for women's health, and supporting women's reproductive health is very important to me. It always has been as a female, and so as a school board member, gun safety is huge. I can't tell you how many nights I've lost sleep over threats, and just making sure that we're doing our job to prevent everything that we possibly can. I mean, that's really important to me, and so I think when you look at my platform, I reach across the aisle in everything that I do. I am a business person, and so I want to support businesses and make sure we have business-friendly regulations so that we can grow our economies. And I think I have public sector and private sector experience that match up. I'm very pro-education, and so I think these are things that will naturally tend to having me work with both sides. I don't plan on working with one side. If I did, I should have stayed home. I would not have stepped up. On the school board, I can tell you I've had the privilege of appointing 4 school board members. 2 of them have been Democrat and 2 of them have been Republican. Most people say they're bipartisan. I can prove that I am. I can show you that I have worked across party lines and actually elected, put people into position that were not in my party. And so I think that that's very, very important. And I think that's the leadership that we're missing everywhere in our country, is just being very polarized. And I am tired of it, and I don't want to bring that to the legislature at all. I want to bring a very open-minded approach, and I'm hopeful that I will be well received, because I want to work with the Democrats as much as I want to work with the Republicans.
And you think you have the, I guess you would say, the gumption and the fortitude to buck leadership when need be?
Well, I think that I am running on a platform that is probably different than most Republicans, and I think that that's who I am, and I've been supported, and so I think that I think they like the things that I'm strong on.
What other priorities do you have besides the QEM, and obviously PERS is looming no matter what you want to do?
How long do we have? Okay, so I have a lot. First, I want to help foster kids. Our foster care system is a mess. Every one that is in the foster care system, every adult has failed them in their lives. And we as a government cannot fail our foster kids. I want to make sure that we make that system better. I think we need to work on the background checks. Background checks should not take 18 months to 2 years long. We're losing families, and we don't have qualified families. We should make sure that system is long enough to make sure people are interested, and we get a long trail of input, but I don't see any reason why that should be more than 3 or 4 months at this point in the world, where everything can be done in a matter of days. But I don't think you want a background check that's a matter of days. You've got to make sure that there's time, but not with the amount of time that we have. I also think the way that we're funding the legal fees for the foster care kids doesn't help them. We shouldn't be just funding the legal fees first and letting lawyers take on hundreds of kids. We should make sure we have real advocates that are working for them.
When you say legal fees, can you be specific? What are you talking about?
So there's an $800 fee that's paid per kid to take the kids to court. It's paid for before they represent the kids. I don't think that's serving them well. And so I think we should work through that system. Mental health, I want to work on mental health. I believe that we need to work together more cohesively and have other organizations have skin in the game. Right now we're funded, our mental health is all funded on the county, and I don't know any school district, any police department, any hospital, any fire department that isn't handling mental health as well. I think we should have those agencies at the table as well to make sure that everyone's needs are met and that we're functioning as a cohesive group, because if we're not doing our jobs and we're not able to serve our community, and it's a huge growing problem. Our search and rescue is also distributed by county, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we have mountain ranges that aren't cut up by county. And so I unfortunately had a staff member, co-worker that we lost on the mountain, and search and rescue had a very difficult time figuring out what county he was in before they could go rescue him. And so I think we should really work through that system and make it work for the people that need the system, and I'd like to change that. I also would like to work on human trafficking. We have a large problem with human trafficking in Bend, and it's something that is shocking, and I really believe that we can do better than that. But one of the things that we have is a mandated amount of time that is given for offenses, and so it's sort of out of the judge's hands, and our time frame is 18 months. So if you're caught and prosecuted for human trafficking, you get an 18-month sentence. It's one of the lowest in the country, and I think we should be one of the highest in the country. I don't think we want to allow human trafficking to be happening in our state. So.
A couple follow-ups to some of this stuff.
Okay. Was that enough? Do you want more?
You're gonna have a busy session.
In terms of the foster care system, your predecessor in House 54 has pinned this largely on Kate Brown and her leadership. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think leadership comes from the top, and so we need to lead, and we need to lead at every level, and we can't accept this, and we still have a broken system. So I think we need to change that.
In terms of mental health, you mentioned it before, and I was just curious, you know, with the cuts to mental health services in the school district, starting dovetailing from that, I was curious what role and how the collaboration works with the counties in terms of getting more funding toward the schools for that.
So I think that there's a lot of, okay, so let's back up a little bit. Budgets are very siloed, right? And what happened in the recession is budgets shrank everywhere, right? And so what happened? People got more siloed. Like, no, I can't help you with that. I have to take care of this mission and I'm getting less. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is break down the silos where people are working across these agencies better. And I think that if we had some budgetary incentives to work together, we could move the needle on that. And so I really strongly believe in that. I think it's really important. And the school district is providing services and the county is providing services. And if we can make sure that we're working together, and that might be something that we drive by a budgetary decision, then we'll make sure that people are working together. Like today I was at the homeless forum for the candidates. And one of the things that I think the Homeless Leadership Coalition, which I've been on the board for, has done very well is break down duplicate services. And so when I found out there was 620 homeless kids a few years back in our system, I was horrified, and it's still horrifying. so I went to this Homeless Leadership Coalition board, which meets every Friday at 9 o'clock, the first Friday of the month at 9 o'clock at the library. And when I got there, what I found was, you know, Mosaic Medical, Housing Works, you know, multiple different agencies that provide all these services, the Bethlehem Inn, Shepherd's House, and they all come together for this hour and a half once a month to be able to talk about what they're doing. And so they're like, oh, I have utility grants. Who needs those? I have, you know, this much more, how many people? And then some people will raise their hand and they'll say, okay, let's meet afterwards. And so I think that real collaborative spirit really serves well in government, and it takes away a lot of needless repeating in different areas. And so if we could all work together for our students, I think that that would be very helpful, because you know, we have to have that cohesive plan, and that, I think, moves mountains with budgets, because you're taking budgets that you might be duplicating services on and working together, and so you're getting a squared effect versus just a doubled effect.
So knowing that mental health really is very much tied to homelessness in many instances, those are issues that, you know, are intrinsically tied and still kind of dealt with by the county. Do you agree with the county's decision this year to cut property taxes, and thereby lower their budget when that could have been used maybe for more mental health services?
I'm not really clear on what their actual decision was on that. So if I had more information, I would be able to comment better on that. But I think we're really, really behind in our mental health services in our area. I mean, we have 49 suicides in Deschutes County last year. 49. That's a huge number. It's disproportionately large. It's something that we have to, as a community, come together and work around and fix.
Okay.
Do you have any more questions, Judy?
I guess the only one, I know you're an education advocate, but one of the things that has been a growing, I guess you would say, force out there is, I guess you would call it more privatization of educational services. And that comes down to education itself too.
Can you explain that?
Well, things like a growing number of private charter schools that receive public money. Things that are not as, you know, controlled within the public education environment. I guess I'd like to know what your position is on maintaining a vital public education system
First charter, it's a privatization.
versus the private,
Oh, so are you talking like vouchers? Do you mean vouchers?
Vouchers, yes,
I
yes.
hate
I'm sorry.
vouchers.
Should have been clear. Yes, thank you. Yeah, vouchers
So
and that kind of, you know, basically, yeah.
I can give you a little thought process on how I feel about vouchers and charters. So I went with the National School Boards Association to Washington DC to advocate for multiple things that, you know, the federal government provides: our secure rural schools, our funding for food and nutrition, our special education services, amongst other things. And so while I was there was 2 school board members that I ran into from New Orleans, and they went to a statewide voucher system program, and I asked them how that was working, and they said it was terrible. And one of the things that's really hard is it pulls out students from the public school system, and it doesn't work for them. It's not, you leave behind, the private schools are not accepting. In New Orleans, they were not accepting the special education kids. They were not accepting kids that couldn't get transportation to their schools. And so you are making a hard situation even worse. I think the answer is really investing in our systems and making our systems stronger. And one of the things that I really am proud of Oregon for is being a leader in the United States with our charter school programs, because our charter school programs are approved by the school boards. And so we have a say in how that education runs. It's less of a say than we do in our public schools, but it's still a very, we still oversee them. And so I think that's a very important the important difference in the way that the other schools are running them. For us on Benwood Pine, we've approved many charter schools, but we always have the stipulation that they provide something different, because we want to provide different options. And so I support different options that are publicly funded, because I think that's really important. We have the Bend International School, and that provides a component that we don't provide in any of our other schools. And then we have our Montessori school, which does the same thing. It provides a different type of education. And so one of the things that I think makes public schools very successful is making sure that we provide options that all kids need, because all kids are not going to fit into the same little, box. And so we have to make sure that we have robust options, and charter schools are a great way to deliver that. We have Realms that I supported as a board member for a charter school, and now they're a magnet school. And then we have our other magnet programs, which are really awesome, our new 2 high school programs, which I'm very excited about, because we didn't have many options in Bend for high school kids, and not all kids want to go to a comprehensive high school, and so we found some kids were actually going to an alternative high school just because they wanted a smaller high school. So we've created 2 smaller high school programs, and so I believe that inside the system there's room for approval of different options, and we can move those forward while we're sustaining a robust education system at the same time. I don't think that we should put them at odds with each other. And then we have Seven Peaks and Cascades Academy, which serve the community that wants a private school, which is another great option to have for communities as well. And so that's how I think that the school system should operate, and I think it's great that Oregon is ahead of the rest of the nation on that.
Forgive me for not knowing this, but do those charter schools within Benwood Pine, do they have any mandate to serve special needs students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, good.
Yeah, and so when we
Pretty
did
rigorous.
Realms, we actually went a little bit step further, and this is one of the things that's great about having the district oversee and be in charge of handing the charter status to the schools. We put in an extra special education teacher into Realms when they were a charter school, just so that we could make sure that we had that, those services for those kids to make sure they excel. Because the whole goal is that you make sure all kids excel. And so we monitor all the charter schools every year to make sure where their testing is and how their kids are accomplishing. Because you don't want to have options for option's sakes that aren't providing success. You've got to make sure that they're successful. And so I think the model that Oregon went to, I think it was 20 or 25 years ago, is really a great model, and I think we should stick with that.
Anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up? We don't want to make this an
It doesn't-
extensive
it
interview
doesn't
today.
Jinx you.
No, that doesn't what?
Jinx or.
Oh, yeah. Are you sure this table is wood, by the way? No.
I just want to say thank you for the time. Thank you for considering my endorsement, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming in.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good to chat. You didn't
Always.
point at me ever, did you?
I never did, and it's still
Okay.
recording.